A great philosopher by the name of Confucius once said, "Study the past if you would define the future." This important quote tells us that in order to effectively understand the future, we need to properly understand the past sequence of events that led to the present state of comprehension.
Sorry guys, I just bought this new camera the other day and I'm testing out the lighting. But anyways, let's get straight to the point. In this video, I want to talk about two important things. Number one, about the history of the different origins and translations of the Bhagavad Gita. And number two, what translation I will be using in order to provide the best unbiased context out there to understand the most meaning of the scripture. So stay tuned. In order to understand the Bhagavad Gita, we need to understand the origins of the different translations that exist today. And because there's so many different translations out there, it is only natural to question what translation is the best and most authentic. Here's the problem with this question. The foundation of Hinduism and the Bhagavad Gita cannot be narrowed down to one particular philosophy. And so for the sake of this argument, I will be analyzing and discussing 4 different schools of thoughts, also known as Vedanta schools, that kind of paved the way for modern translations to exist today. And I will also be including the literature links in the description box down below in case you guys want to check it out. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. So let's start with our first philosopher, SANKARA. He essentially found the Advaita philosophy, which literally translates to non-dualism. And in order to understand this philosophy, there are 3 terms that we need to understand. Number 1, the Atman, or also known as Jivatma, which literally translates to individual souls. And the second term is Brahman, also known as Paramatma, which translates to the ultimate soul, or the soul of all souls, or the most supreme reality that exists. And the third term is called Maya, which translates to illusion. Shankara says that the Atman, the individual soul, and the Brahman, the supreme soul, are not different and are one and the same. And that the world we live in is a Maya, which is an illusion. And whatever we experience in this world is an illusion. And the ultimate point of this is that there's only one individual soul that exists in the universe, and that is the supreme soul, Brahman. With this philosophy in mind, the translations of the Bhagavad Gita do not primarily put Lord Krishna as the supreme soul. The next couple of philosophies that I'll be talking about are related to this term called Vaishnavism, which translates to the worship of Lord Vishnu or his incarnates, such as Krishna. I don't want to get too in-depth about this term, but with this idea in mind, let's dive into the next couple of philosophies. The next philosopher is Ramanuja, and he propagated the Vishishta Advaita philosophy, which literally translates to qualified non-dualism. What does qualified mean in this context? Well, Ramanuja basically attributes a quality to the whole non-dualistic perspective. The perfect analogy for this would be, think of the sun. It's a huge ball of fire. And coming out of that ball are these tiny sparks of fire that also can cause the same amount of heat or damage that the sun produces. It's significantly less in size, but it still has the same features. So the sun in this context is the Brahman, or the ultimate reality, and we, the individual souls, Atman, are considered those tiny sparks that come out of the sun. So Ramanuja basically says that the sparks are real, so we are real, and the huge ball of fire, the sun, is also real. And us put together collectively form that ultimate reality, or the ball of fire, the sun. And he says that the individual souls like us depend on that higher soul, and vice versa. The higher supreme soul also depends on us. The next philosopher under the umbrella of Vaishnavism is Madhva, and he propagated the Dvaita philosophy, which means dualism or dualistic philosophy. And what he did was he separated the Atman and the Brahman, and he established them as two separate entities. And Brahman is represented as Vishnu, and he is the supreme soul. The next philosopher under the umbrella of Vaishnavism is Chaitanya, and his philosophy is the Achintya Bheda Abheda philosophy, which literally translates to the philosophy of inconceivable, oneness and difference. Emphasis on the word inconceivable. To understand this philosophy better, let me give you two analogies. The first one is the one I gave you earlier, about thinking the sun as the Brahman, or the ultimate reality, and the sparks that come out of the sun as individual souls. And together, collectively, we form the supreme soul. So keep that in mind. The next one is the cat analogy, I like to say, or the kitten analogy. So think of a mother cat and her children kittens. And so when you notice when a cat gives birth to its children, you notice that the children, the baby kittens, cannot travel anywhere on their own. So what the mother does, she carries the baby kittens by her mouth. So from an ordinary person's perspective, it might look like she's eating her own kittens, which is really messed up. But only the mother knows that she is carefully carrying her kids safely from one place to another. She grabs them by their neck in a very delicate manner, and she helps them move from one place to another. But from an ordinary person's perspective, it might look like she's eating her babies alive. And that's what I mean by inconceivable. It's not conceivable by an ordinary person such as you or me, but once we get into the practice of devotion, we could start to see it in our own eyes. Once we start to understand the mother cat, we understand what it does. We understand how it carries its babies through its mouth. So same way, it's inconceivable for an ordinary person without the devotional practice. But once we are in that wavelength and we tuned our minds into that sort of energy, we can fathom everything that the Atman and the Brahman relate to. So that is what inconceivable means. And what Chaitanya also did is that he propagated the Bhakti movement, which is a movement that places all its emphasis on devotional service to Lord Krishna. The philosophies of SANKARA, RAMANUJA, MADHVA, and CHAITANYA have been translated up until this date. And the question comes up, what translation will I be using to do the best justice for all of these translations? just to preface, I am not a scholar or pundit in this field of study or Bhagavad Gita in general. So I highly recommend that you guys do your own research and due diligence before coming to any conclusions about the Bhagavad Gita. And with that being said, the translations that I will be using to provide the most unbiased value, in my opinion, is from two schools of thoughts. And I will be concatenating both of these schools' opinions into my own conclusions. So the first school that I'll be using is outside the school of outside the umbrella of Vaishnavism, from Sankara, and one is within the school of Vaishnavism, and that is from Chaitanya. So I will be merging these two philosophies and forming my own opinions based on them. And I feel like this provides the best value because one is kind of biased towards Vishnu or Krishna, and one doesn't attribute the supreme entity to any lord whatsoever. So by understanding this, I feel like I would be able to provide the best value from my own perspective. Regardless of if you believe in the Advaita philosophies, the most important goal and takeaway at the end of the day for all these philosophers is self-realization and understanding ourself in the place of the universe. If you guys found any sort of value through this video, make sure to show some love in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And most importantly, don't forget to stay insightful. Peace.